Board Game Banter reviews Cartagena 2, The Pirate's Nest, from Rio Grande Games, designed by Leo Colovini. This is a fun little game I played recently, and I realized that there were no English reviews, video reviews on the Geek, and thought let's spin one up. This is a great little game with a simple mechanic, but feels a little bit deeper. We'll take a look at the mechanics, how the game plays. I'll walk you through a few turns in a Rado runs through it fashion, and then I'll also offer some opinion and talk about the differences between this version and Cartagena 1. In Cartagena 1, you are a band of pirates trying to escape from prison. In a similar fashion, you move across a board trying to get to a boat to get to safety. Here in Cartagena 2, your same band of pirates will be escaping from an island across the boat, ultimately trying to get to safety and freedom in the city. The components are quite nice, as Rio Grande Games is very well known to do. Nice little pirate meeples. And the board then is made up of these various tiles that contain different order of 7 icons. So each of the tiles have the same 7 icons dispersed in a different order. It's a card-driven game, as it were, and each of the cards then have a symbol that matches those icons on the board tiles. To begin with, a player is dealt 7 cards. Each player then can take one of 3 actions, up to 3 on their turn, to either move their pirates forward, draw more cards, or to move the ship. On a player's turn, if I were green, I would play a card from my hand and move my pirate to the next available icon. So let's say here I would play a map card from my hand to move my pirate to the next available unoccupied icon. And that would be 1 action. Discarding the card then, I now have 2 more actions, and I could then play another card. In this case, because I have another map card, if I play that one, I could choose to move another one of my meeples, bypassing the first occupied map icon on the board. Because it's occupied, I would skip it, jumping all the way to the next available unoccupied location. That would then be my second action, and in this case, let's just say this were my strategy. I have a third. I could then choose to move either of the pirates on the board already, or yet another from the starting position. If I were to move this pirate, he would then bypass all of the spots because there are no other maps on the tile, and jump all the way to the boat. The boat can handle as many pirates as it wants, as the players wish to stuff on there, but only up to 3 of each color. In this case, as a turn, green's turn would be complete. That was 3 actions. If we continued to play and it were red's turn, red then has the choice to make from its own 7 cards. So here you'll see again, if red were to play the map card, green having vacated the map, red is not able to skip that location, but instead moves and occupies that position. That would be one turn, 1 action on their turn. Further along, for each card played, red could then advance to the next available icon of that color, of that type. Up to 3 actions. Okay, so this is where it starts to get interesting. In order to gain more cards, you don't draw at the end of your turn. But what you do is move opponent meeples forward, and the position that they occupy will determine the number of cards that you draw. So if it were green's turn again, and although green has 4 cards remaining after 1 turn, green would maybe decide that they need more cards in order to be more strategic about their movement. If this were just a 2-player game and we're only playing green and red, green would then be able to move red forward to occupy a location that a pirate is already standing on. So just for example, I could move this pirate here, would go forward 1 spot. The number of cards I draw is equal to the number of pirates that were previously on that location. So I would draw 1 card for green. The trick is each location can only handle a maximum of 3. So let's just say, for example, that this one were full and it were green's turn and I wanted to draw more cards. I could take another red from the starting position and I would have to skip this initial location that's already full with 3, and I would move it forward all the way to the next available. I never have the option to skip positions that are legal placement, so anything with 1 or 2 I cannot skip, and so I could move it from the beginning all the way to this spot, and I would draw then 1 card. So that would, if that ended green's turn, and red were now to the player, red cannot move their own pieces forward to get more cards. You can only move an opponent forward. So here, this would be a nice move because green could jump up to the next available spot, and I would draw 2 cards because there were 2 pirates on that location. If you move an opponent all the way to the boat, or similarly to the end position, that's automatically 2 pirates. 2 cards. Regardless of how many are on the boat, you would draw 2 cards for moving an opponent to the boat. So the boat gets interesting. Let's say that we continue to play and it's still just red and green. The boat can handle a maximum of 3 pirates of any one color. As one of your available actions, you can move the boat from Island 1 to Island 2, but you can only do so if you have a pirate on the boat. Now there is a captain's rule where the player with the most, or any players who are tied with the most pirates on the boat, can, at the very beginning of their turn, before any actions are taken, move the boat for free. So in this case, if it were now green's turn, green could, as its first action, move the ship across the chasm for a free action. Green now has still 3 available actions that they can take. So I would maybe want to try and move as many of my pirates off the boat as possible. Coins, compass, and maps. So then red, that would be all 3 actions for green. And so now as it's red's turn, red can, of course, move their pirates off of the boat. Green could have only taken 2 actions to abandon as many as possible from the ship, and then as their third action could have moved the ship back to shore, back to Island 1. You can only move the boat back to Island 1 if you still have pirates remaining on Island 1. So if green had vacated the island completely and all of the meeples were over here on the second half of the board, green would never be able to simply move the boat back, almost a sabotage action to try and prevent red from getting off of the boat. In this case, now that it's red's turn, moving the boat back didn't really help green at all because red becomes the captain. They have the most meeples on the boat, and for a free action, they could again move the ship across. So moving the ship either takes 1 action or is a free action if at the beginning of your turn you wish to move it and have the most or are tied for the most. The only other rule in the game comes from cards that have this gold border. When a card with the gold border is played, players all discard their hands down to 7. The game ultimately ends when a player moves all of their pirates into the city, the Jolly Roger is lifted, and the winner is declared. Playing this recently, a friend called it the Candyland mechanic, where you are simply playing cards in order to move forward to a space. I took it initially as derogatory, but his point was Leo Colovini makes you think you're playing something very simplistic, almost childish, but there is a good amount of strategy. Some of the decisions that you'll need to make, when to move an opponent forward. And is that beneficial for them, or will that get you enough cards? Do you have enough cards in your hand to continue to move at will, or are you limited? There are also times where you can potentially bait an opponent into moving one of your pirates forward. So let's just say, for example, an instance of that. If it were green's turn, green could potentially move this one there, draw a card. Sometimes I don't want to leave a position open like this that will allow my opponent to move a pirate meeple into that spot so that they can get 2 cards. But it also might be beneficial for me to tempt them, if green were to finish the turn here, that red might be tempted then, knowing that they could get 2 cards from this movement, they are tempted to move green into this position. So can you bait your opponent into moving some of your pieces for you? You also want to be strategic about which locations you leave occupied or possibly taken up. So if, for example, if I were green and I had occupied the 2 compass positions, knowing that red can play a compass and jump all the way to the ship, I may instead try and move my meeple forward if I were to play a card and move him forward. That then limits the options available for my opponent, how far they can move. Remembering, any occupied icon can be bypassed when the card is played. You move all the way to the next available unoccupied location or all the way to the ship. And that's really it for the rules. Pretty simple, but I think enough strategy and depth that it makes it a lot of fun. So let me talk briefly about the difference between this version and the first version. So in review, this version, in order to draw more cards, you move your pieces, you move your opponent's pieces forward. In Cartagena 1, you're left with one straight board So let's talk about the differences between Cartagena and Cartagena 2. Remember, in Cartagena 2, in order to draw more cards, you move an opponent's piece forward. In Cartagena 1, the mechanic is very similar. The board is set up, the only difference being there's no ship in the middle, the goal being to escape prison all the way to the ship. Cartagena 1 is very similar, but in order to draw more cards, you move your pieces back. So if it were green's turn, green could play, for example, as its first action, a parrot card. As a second action, playing a treasure chest, green moves into that spot, and then as the third action, again, this is Cartagena 1, it would move its own piece back to an occupied spot to draw 1 card. So the biggest difference between the 2 games is really moving forward an opponent to draw cards in Cartagena 2, this version, and in Cartagena 1, moving your own pieces back to draw additional cards. So frankly, you can play both versions with probably either game setup. I don't remember all the components from Cartagena 1, but you could certainly play Cartagena 1 with the Cartagena 2 pieces. I think this is actually a quite good little game. I think it's a great introductory gateway type of game where, again, the mechanics and the rules are simple, very easy to explain, very simple to understand what your options are, and there seems to be enough depth to keep you interested. I think it's quite fun. It's a great little game. I rate it pretty highly. Certainly not the most strategic game. There is definitely some randomness when it comes to the cards, and possibly a disadvantage for going first, where other, your opponents may then be able to bypass your locations and jump ahead. There's some varying opinion about that. In my mind, great little game. Cartagena 2, Rio Grande Games. I like it.